Next, we will have a Dharma talk from Elaine Sensei.
Thank you. Thus have we heard. At a time when physical distancing is required, yet social solidarity is so needed, the great physician Buddha offers medicine to alleviate the hurts of the world. A net of jewels, each a precious being, an infinite mirror to see ourselves. Interlinked is the rising wall of suffering. Interlinked are the efforts to surmount walls. Interlinked, we turn the wheel of Dharma, turning views to see things clearly, turning hearts to know that we are not alone. Like a lotus flower blossoms above muddy water, drawing nutrients from darkest despair. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namandots, Namandots, Namandots. Good morning, Ohio gozaimasu. That opening reflection is an excerpt from Reverend Duncan Williams' piece, Solidarity Sutra. And I love so much of it, especially the last two lines where the lotus flower blossoming above the muddy water draws nutrients from the darkness below, or as he wrote, from darkest despair. It can serve as a metaphor for the grief and hope of the March 11th, 2011 catastrophic earthquake and tsunami, which hit the coast of northeast Japan, claiming the lives of an estimated 20,000 people and devastating coastal communities. This coming Thursday marks the 10-year anniversary of that disaster. And like the lotus flower drawing nutrients from darkest despair, those families and communities mark a decade of mourning, recovery, and rebuilding. It also serves as an appropriate metaphor for our life during this time of the pandemic, as over 500,000 Americans have lost their lives to this insidious disease, and 2.5 million have worldwide since the shelter-in-place orders were issued a little over a year ago. Drawing nutrients, drawing physical, emotional, and spiritual strength from darkest despair is how many have coped with the loss of loved ones, with the loss of comfort and security, with the loss of basic income and all the securities that come with that, and with the loss of the socialization with our family and friends. I am so grateful for the spiritual foundation of Shin, which nourishes me during these challenging times. Last month, an article appeared in the Wheel of Dharma in the back Japanese language section of the paper, which was an excerpt taken from an interview I gave back in 2019, just after the World Buddhist Women's Convention concluded. I thank Reverend Kesuke for translating it for me, since I don't read or speak Japanese. The interviewer was with the Honganji newspaper, the Shinpo, in Kyoto, Japan. And the small piece published in the Wheel of Dharma was my response to the interviewer's question about how to bring people into Shin and how to make it relevant. It was actually the last question he had asked me at the end of an hour-plus long discussion. So his last question was about propagation. He asked, what does Shinju Buddhism need to do to spread the word or spread in the world? What are we missing? What are we missing? So after thinking for a few moments, I think maybe he expected me to say only one thing that we were missing, but three things rolled off my tongue. The first was the recognition of the intelligence of our congregants. We don't need to simplify the teachings. We don't need to dumb them down. There's no blind faith in Buddhism. There is definitely faith and devotion. I feel great faith and great devotion to Shin. But faith, as I understand it personally, is confidence in the teachings. I have experienced innumerable benefits since meeting with the teachings, since these profound teachings have come into my heart. So let's talk about everything. It's not imperative. We don't have to have special study courses in order to talk about the different aspects of Shin. There's no need to simplify or be narrow-visioned in what we teach or share during our services. Let's talk about everything. The second thing I mentioned was that our children and our children's children are firmly established in the 21st century. This particular tradition of ours originated from Japan, and many of the cultural norms were brought over and incorporated into temple life over 120 years ago. But it's really important to recognize what is cultural and what is actually the Pure Land teachings. How do we honor our past and yet adapt to the present? I care when another minister uses gendered male pronouns for Amida. I care when we fail to look at how patriarchy is perpetuated in our Shin institutions. I care when I can't find any rational explanation for the perpetuation of patrilinealism, which is rooted in culture, not in our Buddhist texts. Shinran's teaching of the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu, transcends cultural, socioeconomic, and language differences. Namo Amida Butsu means I take refuge in boundless compassion, supporting me and sustaining me always. Are we embodying this compassion with others? Because that is the heart of the teachings of Amida Buddha, as I appreciate it. The Nembutsu is a teaching of open-heartedness and open-mindedness, of profound equality and non-discrimination. Do we walk the talk? Thirdly, and this is the only part that was actually printed, I said that I thought that we need to teach those who are not well versed in general Buddhism exactly that. Shin is a part of this big, beautiful tree we call Buddhism. And everyone benefits from learning about this big, beautiful tree, because by understanding the foundations of Buddhism, as well as other Buddhist schools, we can better understand and appreciate our own Jodo Shinshu tradition. I've noticed how we sometimes separate Shin from traditional or general Buddhism, but there's no separation. We don't have the Four Noble Truths on one hand and Shin Buddhism on the other hand. The Four Noble Truths are a part of Shinshu. Shinjin, according to Shinran, our founder, means the true, real, and sincere mind and heart. It's the mind of the Buddha. And the mind of the Buddha is a mind that accepts how things are, impermanent and interdependent. This is in contrast to our mind, my mind, which struggles against change, struggles against impermanence, struggles against connectedness with people who are different from me or whom we don't like or think we don't like, struggles against clinging to pleasurable experiences and not wanting to let go of them, and feeling sad or disappointed when they do, struggles against old age, struggles against sickness, struggles against the physical and emotional discomfort and pain all human beings experience at some time in their life. This very perspective is the first noble truth of dukkha, suffering, discomfort, disappointment, unhappiness, unsatisfactoriness. The second noble truth is causation, the truth of the cause of this dukkha. In Shin, we call it self-power. It's the calculative mind of enlightened beings who mistakenly believe themselves to be free of our blind passions of attachment, aversion, and delusion, or greed, anger, and folly, as Shinran called it. And as we rely on this delusion, we sink more and more into samsara, that process where we create and recreate our own suffering. The third noble truth is the truth of liberation from this suffering. In Shin, we call it other power. Shinran defined other power as that which is devoid of self-centered calculations. Other power isn't an absolute being or even something separate from ourselves. As Reverend Tai Tietso Uno describes it, it is dynamic life, open and boundless, realizing itself in a foolish being. In doing so, the being of self-power and blind passions is transformed into its very opposite, liberated, free, authentic. And so this working of other power is manifested as great compassion. The fourth noble truth is that of the path. And from a Shin perspective, the Eightfold Path's right mindfulness is near and dear. Nembutsu is right mindfulness. Nem comes from the Sanskrit word smrti, which means to contemplate, to think upon. And Butsu is the Buddha. So essentially being mindful of the Buddha. The Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu, is an invitation from the Buddha to let go of the ego self and to entrust oneself to boundless compassion. So in Shin, it's not about pursuing or achieving, but about receiving. It is then that one becomes free of self-clinging and self-cherishing and accustoms oneself to the stage of the truly settled. Namo Amida Butsu is the self-articulation of reality, and it is the fundamental cause of supreme liberation for a foolish being like myself. So I do appreciate that Jodo Shinshu is right in alignment with the teachings of the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha. When he was once asked about what he teaches, he replied, "Formerly and now, I teach suffering and the end of suffering." Isn't that exactly what the three Pure Land teachings teach? And didn't Shinran teach this as well? Isn't that the whole point of Buddhism, regardless of what tradition or school we belong to? The very first question that began this interview was, what is the uniqueness of the Jodo Shinshu teaching? How do you value the teaching of Shinran Shonin? I had replied that I especially appreciate the egalitarian aspect of Shin, the all-inclusive, all-encompassing, non-discriminatory nature of Nembutsu. You don't need to be a scholar or a monastic or a priest to live a life of Nembutsu. Everyone receives the liberating light of compassion. The great compassionate bodhisattva vow of Amida is to liberate all beings, beginning with a foolish, self-centered person like myself, who struggles with the all too human limitations of attachment, aversion, and delusion. The light of compassion exposes both my foolishness, my Bombu nature, while also shining a light on the compassionate activity that is always supporting me. Because nothing is permanent, everything is precious. Because nothing is permanent, everything is precious. We are constantly receiving opportunities to see the boundless kindness and compassion that has and continues to touch us in a myriad of ways. Namo Amida Butsu is my expression of gratitude for being received into the great vow of compassion. Let us close with the wise words once again of Reverend Williams. Thus have we heard, at a time when physical distancing is required, yet social solidarity is so needed, the great physician Buddha offers medicine to alleviate the hurts of our world. A net of jewels, each a precious being, an infinite mirror to see ourselves. Interlinked is the rising wall of suffering. Interlinked are the efforts to surmount walls. Interlinked, we turn the wheel of Dharma, turning views to see things clearly, turning hearts to know that we are not alone. Like a lotus flower blossoming above muddy waters, drawing nutrients from darkest despair. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namandots, Namandots. Please stay safe, healthy, and hopeful, and connected.
Thank you, Elaine Sensei.